So then what are we going to have to deal with? Nature. The big threat is that we're destroying the planet, and you need the scientists now to tell you why and how you can stop it. And the plague is such a great little thing to pull. I mean, polio had worn thin, admit it. The CDC, nobody even knew what the hell the CDC was in 1975. And by 1980, their budget was definitely under review. And the head of the CDC says, there's a memo intercepted by the Freedom of Information Act, and this guy says, we need a plague. A plague is what the CDC needed, and that's what they got. And now they're already warming up the next one. They're talking about Ebola virus like it was something brand new that had happened because of the ecological crisis in Africa, and it was going to get us. And we have to be ready to mobilize the CDC, put their uniforms on. You know, those guys have uniforms. They have uniforms. They don't wear them, but they have uniforms. In fact, when that critter with the funny beard was the head of he's like our big doctor, the big doctor in Washington. Coop, he said we're going to have to wear the uniforms at least once a week because keep people reminded that we're Army. Those guys are crazy. I mean, they are. They really are crazy, and the things that they dream up are stranger than things that would make good movies. They're just, you know, this virus is mad because we've encroached on its habitat, so now it's going to come out and get us? Well, they don't have legs. Viruses don't have legs or wings or any kind of way to move, and they don't give a shit about us. And they don't care about their environment. They never heard of that. And they're just sitting there in some place, and they've always been there, and they always probably will, lurking around, but they're not after us. And we're not making a mess out of this earth either. We aren't. We're an arrogant little bunch of naked apes. That's all we are. And we're crowing about this horrible disease that's decimating our planet and paying all these people fortunes and taking poisonous things. I mean, we're dumb. Why would the viruses care about us? I mean, maybe they care about the whales. I bet you if there's any problem on the planet now, it's the ants. Okay, because, I mean, and I'm straying afield here, but I'm telling you, we're not just talking about the details of the HIV positive test or this pretty little invention of mine that fixed me up good. I mean, if you don't like it, it certainly set me up. I mean, I didn't do it. I had no idea about AIDS at that point. I was thinking about other things, but it did fit right into there, and I liked having done it, but it's like everybody else has got to have their own kind of thing like that.
Tell us how you found out, how
found out what?
The blood work you were doing for the LA Blood Bank.
You mean how I discovered that there was no evidence that there was HIV?
Yeah.
That HIV caused AIDS? Okay, this is my personal story, but I mean, the general fact is there isn't any, and you can check it yourself. You can go to the internet, and you can say, AIDS, cause, return. Go on Alta Vista or something like that, bang, you'll get papers. The first 20 hits you get, out of those there will probably be about 6 or 7 that suggest that there is no evidence, okay? There will be not a single one that suggests that there is evidence for a causal relation between those two things. Now, when I was working down the street here, it was down that way, down toward Michigan Street, a place called Specialty Labs, I was working for those guys 3 or 4 days a month, and I was setting up tests to look for viruses like HIV in the blood supply for LA. And since there were so many people in LA, there was going to be it was a pretty hard, how are you going to test all the blood? It's about 1,000 bottles every day. So we had put a lot of effort into it, and we'd been successful, and I was having to write that up for the people who had paid for it, which is your representative government. And I was writing this little paragraph, and I said, well, I've got to explain why we were doing it in the first place. So I said, well, HIV is the probable cause of AIDS. That was my first sentence, because I thought it was, because that's what I'd heard. And I hadn't questioned it. I just heard it. I said, well, if all these people think that's true, there's probably evidence back there somewhere that suggests it. And so I asked somebody, what reference, what little work of scientific reporting should I quote so that somebody interested in finding out why I thought that could find out himself? The guy said, the guy that I asked was the wrong person to ask. He said, you don't have to quote that. You don't have to say, everybody knows it. I said, well, I don't know why I know it. I just know that I heard it. And in a scientific thing, it's a lot different from a movie where all you have to do is have a character say something you want to have as a fact. In a scientific publication, you are required, by the system, not by the editors of the journals, because they let you get away with a lot of crap sometimes, but you're required by the elements, the scientific things that have made it work, to always tell the person that you're now telling something new to where you started from. You say, I'm starting here, have worked to there. So we moved one small step. But if the place I started wasn't, if I don't even tell you what that is, you don't know we've moved anywhere, and you can't trust that. I have to tell you where I started from. Well, in that case, I couldn't find it. I started asking people. I started getting real sort of uneasy about it after about a year, because I still hadn't written the damn thing, and it was due about a month from when I started it. So it was real late because I couldn't finish it. But I started asking people all over the world, because I started traveling about that time, because everybody studying AIDS wanted to use PCR. That was my invention. So I got invited to all these meetings, and I'd tell them how to do PCR. Well, I didn't care that much about AIDS to begin with, but I started caring after I realized none of these people, when asked directly, privately, sweetly, could come up with anything to help me out, and all I wanted to have was one scientific paper to quote that I could say, this is where I got the concept from that HIV is the probable cause of AIDS. And I thought at that point that that's pretty damn significant, because there was a tremendous amount of interest. There were meetings, 10,000 people gather in Amsterdam, 10,000 people gather in various cities around the world every year or two to talk about this work they've been doing at our expense to cure this disease, which they've created at our expense, really. And not a single one of them can find a quote that I could use in a simple little paper to the NIH, that's the National Institutes of Health, that said, the reason you guys sent us $50,000 for this project is because HIV is the probable cause of AIDS, and it would be a good idea to see if it's in the blood supply. Right? There's no way to support that statement. No reason to do that work. It was all a waste of time, except that I enjoyed it. I love to drive from San Diego to LA twice a month. I made a living. And if you think about that, that's where all those guys are making a living. But I changed the question after a while, because I was getting no luck with what should I quote. I finally said, when was it that you came to the conclusion? Because you must be, because you just gave a talk about AIDS and HIV. When did you come to the conclusion that HIV was the probable cause of AIDS? Personally, when did you come to the conclusion? And they would generally allude to some paper or something that they had read or whatever, but no one has ever been able to explain to me anything else than I heard it in the New York Times or on TV. Was that fiction or was that fact on TV? It didn't bother anybody to even think about it. I don't know how it is that we all overlook real obvious things like that. But we've done it before on this planet. We do it regularly. It's expected of us to be idiots. I've got a new disease to attend to. I need a drink. And okay, let's remember this. AIDS is, in fact, and if you look at all this stuff together, if you've ever taken a philosophy course, like an introductory one, I took a bunch of them because they had girls in them, and that my chemistry courses at Berkeley didn't. So I strayed over to the philosophy department a lot. And I thought, this is the most useless information I've ever, but there are some nice reasons to be here. So lately I've started realizing that this is really, this whole thing, it brings out, and from like Christine's story, to Paul's, I'd say, he's kind of young still. The Georgia Tech boys, we're not, I'm one too. But I've aged, and matured. And so I don't jump on him. I'm a libertarian, by nature, but I've become more and more so as I've realized how little I really know about things. And it is not a good idea, I think, to try to find another cause for AIDS before we have found out whether or not the one that the world believes is true and which has caused them so much disaster. See, the cause of AIDS, supposed, HIV, has caused a lot more trouble in the world than AIDS itself. So the thing to do is to don't worry about AIDS right now. It'll go away, by God. It is going away, and it will continue to go away unless the government raises the ante. They're paying $2,500 a year to every county for every AIDS patient. So there's a reason to have AIDS in my county if I'm the health guy, because it's my budget. Like if you think about how many AIDS cases they can claim to have in LA, multiply that by $2,500, and think about how many cars and stuff you can buy with that, you can see why there's an impetus for like saying, if there's anybody that looks anything like an AIDS case, call it AIDS. And don't you listen to Kerry Mullis. He's against the state and humanity and your daughter. But AIDS is going away nonetheless, and if we stop funding it, it would vanish overnight. HIV, however, is something we can detect, and people can make money for detecting it. And as long as when they detect it in someone, that person is pretty much cast into an incredibly bad place in which they will be injected with or coerced to take hideous drugs. Their children will be taken away from them if they won't do it to them. I mean, that's the side of it that we need to worry about. It doesn't make a damn what causes AIDS, really. But the question that we should be asking is, why have we decided that having HIV makes you our favorite Jew, nigger, smoker, whatever we want to jump on, right? You're the perfect one because you brought it on yourself while your lascivious behavior. Something like that. See, we need something like that because, by God, they took away all of our other things like that, didn't they? Those goddamn Democrats. You know, you can't call people names anymore, except you can say they're HIV positive, and you can tell your kids, if you don't eat your cereal, you'll grow up to be HIV positive, and all that stuff. I mean, that's the thing I think we ought to think about here, not whether or not AIDS is caused by it or not. But even if it were caused by it, how do we deal with something like that when maybe it's causal for the very few people that actually get it? See, the people that get AIDS are a very small group compared to the people that have HIV. It may be causal for those people that get it, but it may be that the rest of them just don't have the right chemistry to get AIDS when they get HIV. That's a possibility, which means that AIDS is kind of a genetic heritage that makes you susceptible to some virus that most people can tolerate quite well. That's an alternate hypothesis. Given that that's true, is it fair to stigmatize all of the 99% of people that have HIV but don't have AIDS with the concept that they are going to die and that you better give them some lethal drugs to hasten the process and get them out of the place? I mean, is that all right? I don't know. Maybe if you're homosexual, you should just be killed right away, too, because, you know, you might have it, right? You might have it. We got to check you for it right away. Yeah? Yeah? They didn't do that to you, did they? Or you're just lascivious. So am I. I hadn't had one because I don't go to them. You know, you shouldn't go to those people. You know, you go to witch doctors, they're going to put a hex on you. And if you can prove in your mind that our doctors aren't witch doctors, then look at the definition of witch doctors and see if it doesn't fit. I mean, if you want to go to those people, go ahead, but don't expect them to treat you well. You know, why would you think that they're going to treat you well? That's a neurotic claim. We all know that lawyers don't treat you well, don't we? Do you come on? My lawyer is so bad, he sends me a bill. You know? He sends me more. I mean, he tries to take me for a ride. We know that about them. We know that about ourselves. Don't lay yourself at the feet of somebody just because he puts on a white robe and makes statements in Latin. It's not that medicine doesn't have some good things going for it. They've got drugs, that's for one thing. Sometimes those are useful, but they're not made by those guys. Those guys don't even know how to write the structure of those drugs. Those are made by chemists. You know, we don't go to chemists to find out whether we should pee at the right places or have sex in this way or that, you know. Chemists don't know either. The doctors certainly don't know. I mean, we are living in a pretty weird planet here, but it shouldn't be that weird. It really shouldn't. You go to one profession to get the products from another profession. And the one profession tells you all that stuff about them. They don't know anything about them. The other one doesn't sell them to you. They sell them to those. You know? I mean, it's a funny kind of a thing going on there. A chemist who makes AZT himself can't go out and buy some to take. Same thing with any other drug. The chemists are making them. The chemists don't get to prescribe them. Why don't the doctors make them? Because they don't have the sense. They don't know how to do it. The doctors don't know how to make drugs. They buy them. And if they've got anything else, I'd like to see it. You know, what has changed? What is the difference between our medical people and witch doctors? It's drugs. Now, they don't make them. They have an economic way of like being the only people that can give them to you, and they make money